and just let me know when you, okay. I am now the host. All righty. Okay, so we'll go, and everybody's here. All right, so we'll go ahead and come to order, and everybody's here now. Chief Patrick Smith is with us this evening, and he's going to make a presentation to us about the police department, and specifically what I asked him to do is just to give us a general presentation on how police departments operate. That is, all the moving parts, the departments, the internal departments, and I see you. I'll check. I'll make sure nobody's in the. I don't think anybody's in the waiting room. But he's going to give us a just a general presentation on how the department works. And so, with that being said, and then after he finishes, if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in and ask. And with that being said, Chief, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chief Smith, Helena-West, Helena Police Department. Thank you for allowing me to come here today to give you a brief presentation on the Helena-West, Helena Police Department and our roles and our assignment for our community of Helena-West, Helena. First and foremost, I was appointed as Chief of Police back in April 24th of 2017. And with that being said, the Chief of Police position is a appointed position that is appointed by an elected official. That person will be the mayor of the city of Helena-West, Helena. When we're talking about police departments, we're talking about we are in a structure of what they call a paramilitary organization. And give you a little definition of what a paramilitary organization is an organization is similar to a militarized force whose organization structure, tactics, training, subculture, and functions are similar to those of a professional military, but is not formally part of a country's armed forces. So that being said, a police department has the same rank structure. It has the same mission as a military, but our thing is to enforce the law, protect the citizens, and make sure that we protect property of those citizens as well. Inside the police department, you have rank structures. In 2018, we had, based on the base pay ordinance, there was a position that was called a police entry. I took it upon myself without changing the base pay ordinance to start cadets, because in smaller departments, you would have an individual come in and is hired as a police officer, and you have approximately 9 months to get that person into the academy. But the common practice was we got those individuals hired, we gave them guns and badges, and we put them on the streets, and then we put them out there, and they're supposed to be supervised by a certified full-time officer, but they had the same powers and rights. However, the training part of knowing what a police officer does, knowing the policies, procedures of the Helena-West Helena Police Department and city policies was very critical, and training to know that person understand where he or she job was and how to be effective in that job. Once an officer attends the Arkansas Law Enforcement Training Academy, which is acronym is actually ALETA, that person comes into a rank of an officer first class. This rank is mostly well known. However, these individuals have different job descriptions depending on the employees and the law enforcement department itself. A law enforcement officer first class responsibilities is to actually respond to emergencies, non-emergency calls, patrol assignments, assigned to different areas, obtain warrants, arrest suspects, and testify in court, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. These individuals are responding to the day-to-day operation. They actually, as I could say, they are the foundation of any police department because they go out into the community. They are the representation of our police department, and that's what the whole police department falls upon. After in certain larger departments and some small departments, once an individual have 5 or more years, they can go to actually the rank of police corporal. The police corporal is common to the next step to a hierarchy of law enforcement career. So this individual acts as a supervisor and a watch commanders in actually small agencies. So these individuals are the go-to people in the field, and normally we call them FTOs, which are field training officers. They have seniority. They're the more seasoned or senior individual who the younger, or in our Layton term, the rookie, will go to understand the day-to-day operations. This position is typically the first in the supervisory role, placing officers in some measures of authority over the other officers. So they normally are over the officers first class, the police first entry level or cadet. This officer who becomes this leader, this person is actually promoted to this position. This is not a position that you just move up in the ranks. Normally in police departments, the corporal position is a promoted position through testing, promotional testing. Once an individual has made the rank of corporal, the next step in the hierarchy is a police sergeant. A sergeant is normally what we call first line supervisor. A police sergeant job descriptions depend on the size of their employing agency, and normally this individual is specialized into executing the vision of the police department, supervise and training personnel. They actually weigh in on the disciplinary situations. They help develop new policies for the department and act as a liaison between the upper management and their subordinates. Their responsibilities truly is often a step up from the general supervision task of a corporal. So you have your corporal, who is that person who is that field commander. That individual makes sure that if questions, situations that come up, they report to the next individual who is the police sergeant. They also investigate internal complaints as well, and they envision ways to improve the department. These people are the next step up within the hierarchy. These individuals make sure that everything is maintained, make sure that in departmental situations that go on, they report to what we call next is a mid-level supervisor. A mid-level supervisor, we picture those people as a police lieutenant. The work of a police lieutenant is pretty much as a mid-management role. They take a broad direction for supervisors and turn them into a plan of action for the sergeant and all the way up to the frontline officers and detectives. So the direction comes from the chief of police, and it goes all the way down to the lieutenant. The lieutenant sets the vision of where the police department needs to be. They set the standards for is maintaining training records, maintaining the administrative part of the uniform patrol and detectives that you'll find that's actually in CID. Lieutenants may be selected and assigned to different type of staff. They also can be ensured as the equal employment opportunity of hiring. They can be in the hiring process of hiring new officers and set a schedule of promotion of those who have the seniority to be promoted. And they also evaluate officers and other staff and performance reviews. When we do reviews on individuals or do assessment on individuals within the department, the lieutenant is that person who all the information comes up from the corporal to the sergeant, and that information goes to the lieutenant. That job of the lieutenant is to make sure that day-to-day patrol, uniform patrol operations, and the investigation of CID caseloads, making sure that all the procedures go through court, making sure that everything is on the up and up with the courts, making sure that the courts are notified about individuals who have been detained, individuals who need to go in front of the judge. That information is placed on the lieutenant, where the lieutenant makes sure that everything is working hand in hand within the police department. The next up that we look at is police captains or majors. In 2005, most departments all over the United States changed the rank of captain to majors. In 2018, the city council allowed us to change that name, even though we had captains in the department. They either retired or they no longer with us, but that rank is pretty much on the same page. A captain and a major pretty much have the same role within the police department. The police captain report directly to the chief. That means the assistant chief and the chief of police, or in cases in large departments, they may have a deputy police chief as they manage and direct the activities of the department. The major or slash captain, they actually go there to train personnel, they prepare and monitor programs and budgets and enforce the police policies. So all of this mechanism that going down and at the bottom of the police department, the police major or captain makes sure the compliance within the department under policies, procedures, any ordinances, any resolutions that comes from the city council, we make that individual make sure that we are actually in compliance and making sure that we keep up with the training within the department. They actually become more involved, the police captain major. They get involved in community policing, make smart hiring and promotion. They work with the lieutenants to decide on what individual needs to be promoted. They represent the department in the community and local government. And they also have the step in which situations become critical, or when the department requires what we call a pinch hitter. They are the ones who do more community oriented policing. Those individuals go out into the community and get feedback from the community to bring back into the department and to be reported to the assistant and chief, and also making sure that those ideas and visions of what the community wants, make sure that the police officers are doing it, and making sure that everything at the bottom of that hierarchy is in compliance with day-to-day operations and federal and state guidelines. The next one up, we'll say the assistant chief. Their responsibility is the effectiveness of the administration or the division of the police and technical staff, and normally they watch over day-to-day operations of everything that's below that individual who is in that position. They do everything a police major might do, but they also prepare and to ensure control of the division as acting police chief. If the police chief should need to leave out, be in another place, or whatever, the assistant chief takes on the role as what we call in business the CEO. That individual steps in and makes sure day-to-day operation is going through the entire police department. The role of the assistant chief also plays into the designing of programs like crime prevention that the department or local organizations will implement. This officer typically oversees the budget decisions and all the important choices related to the department's resources. This person makes sure that once everything comes down from the city council to the mayor to the police chief, and making sure everything is in compliance for its administrative, budgeting, making sure that we utilize our resources to maximize level that we can possibly be. That individual makes sure pretty much the day-to-day operation is going through the whole entire police department. Now, the police chief, once again, the police chief is typically this person who is at the top of the authority of the police department. This person actually, my job is to oversee all operations of the department, develop procedures and programs to increase effectiveness and safety, and assign officers to special investigations. This person, as the chief of police, is the department, as we call it, as the departmental head and the go-to person to make sure administrative, make sure all our civilians within the police department is in compliance. They really, if you look at it, they're like a store manager. That person makes sure that everything is operable within the department, make sure that there's community awareness, making sure that this information is getting out to the community, and also making sure that all the facets within the police department is continuing and running effective. As I said, once again, the police chief are appointed by an elected officials. As the public head of the law enforcement agencies, they work closely with the mayors and government officials to imply laws within the department and making sure that ordinances and making sure the day-to-day operation and public safety for the department is spearheaded. So this individual works hand in hand with the city council, any committees, and the mayor, who is the supervisor of the police chief, to make sure everything is effective. So with that being said, the department has a rank structure. What we have done is making sure that all these facets and all these different entities within the police department work and function together. One can't function without the other. The other part of the police department, we have civilians, and when we talk about the civilian entity of the police department, is like a moving machine. It never stops. 24/7, the police department have these individuals as essential workers to make sure that all the operations within the police department is actually moving. So we have records division and clerks. These individuals are responsible for all data that comes through the department, making sure that information is sent through the courts for its affidavits, reports, any reporting system, even crime analysis. These individuals keep this for record for the public, and also working hand in hand with the court system and any individual that's in that system, and making sure that the process within the police department, what goes on in the police department, is generated and sent straight to the courts or any type of federal, state, municipality that needs that information and needs it to be in compliance with all those regulations as well. There's also what we call a communications. We all call it dispatching. The communications is receiving information from the public and sending that information out. Under that, there are guidelines due to information that we receive. That information is critical and pertinent information that can be out and be given out to the public. That information is, if Mr. Joe Doe was pulled over for any infraction, his information is very sacred and it's very sensitive, and that information is given to the police department. There are guidelines through state, what we call ACIC, which is the state communication database that keeps everybody information for the state of Arkansas. And they have what you call NCIC, which is a national database that each individual must have over 120 hours of training to be in these positions, and you have to have continuous education to be in compliance with receiving that information and how do you distribute that information. Those individuals are yearly audited along with the police department. Those are rules and regulations that these individuals have to have through uh, through these entities such as NCIC, ACIC, to make sure they're in compliance and getting that information out, and even how we store that information, how we destroy the information once we receive it, and also keeping record and documentation of the calls that we receive. And those calls and that information is compiled into a NIBRS system, and that system is reported yearly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who have crime stats. We call them FBI. That information is compiled to them, and they send out a nationwide stats of what goes on in a typical area of Phillips County or anywhere in the nation. Next, we have what they call a case coordinator. The case coordinator responsibility is to coordinate all investigative files, cases that goes through CID. CID is the Criminal Investigation Division. They are spearheaded by the chief of police or the assistant chief to overlook any type of crimes or that comes through the police department, making sure that this information is secured. The case coordinator sets up the case files, making sure that all cases are in compliance, to send it over to the court system to make sure this documentation is recorded, and keeping up with the operations within the CID. And in so many words, this individual is actually the book person to make sure they assign the cases, who has the cases, how these cases are going to the court system, whether it's district court, circuit court, federal court, or wherever it may go. This person is, they responsibility is to make sure they keep up with everything that goes on in the investigative branch of the police department. You also, besides the case coordinator, you have the administrative assistant. The administrative assistant is an individual who assists the chief of police and the assistant chief of police with day-to-day scheduling, making sure correspondence are sent out, information is actually sent out throughout the department or any other agency. That a person is also involved in keeping up with any type of time, any type of records of work, labor law, anything that it deals with human resources, and working hand in hand with human resources and making sure that under federal labor law that we're in compliance, and making sure that information is headed and given to the chief of police and the assistant chief of police as well. So with that being said, that's pretty much is the structure of the police department. And there's other entities that's outside of the police department that we work with. We not only work with municipalities, those agencies, but we work with state and federal agencies as an outside resource to make sure that our job is effective and making sure that our operations are going 24/7 a day. And in so many words, the police department that never closed. With that being said, I'll leave the floor for anybody that have any questions.
All right. Thank you, Chief. And I'll start off the questions. I have one question more, and it's going to be more practical. Can you tell everybody on, and I since I deal with this, I sometimes think I know, but I don't want to jump in here and misstate anything. Tell us what happens when you get a call, and let me give you just let me just create a hypothetical. Let's say you get a call. There's been a shooting on the parking lot of Walmart and someone is injured. Can you tell us who responds, and internally, what department do they belong to, or what rank would you expect to respond? And then what happens as this investigation progresses and there's going to be a prosecution? Tell us who the actors are in the police department and how they function.
Okay, so as Mr. Etherly had said, an individual was shot or injured, seriously injured in the parking lot of the Walmart. The responding person is the first initial officer, the first responder who makes that scene. An officer makes this scene, they find out, they assess the crime scene and what's going on. That individual is communicated, that information comes in from a complainant to the dispatcher. The dispatcher dispatched that information to the officer who's in the field. The first officer that makes the scene, that first responder, initial responder, assess the situation. The first thing is due is the care of that individual, making sure that that person has all the medical needs that they immediately need. That means to call the Pafford Ambulance Service, making sure that the entire scene has been secured and preserved for as a crime scene, making sure that all witnesses have been separated, at which time that officer makes contact back with the dispatcher with information that is placed in our log, and making sure that the next person to call is the chief of police or the assistant chief of police, along with a member or members of the CID. CID comes out. Their goal is to investigate the crime, making sure that the scene is preserved, evidence is preserved, making sure witnesses' statements or anything like that is obtained so they can start the case. The next individual in the CID, one of the individuals in the CID, will then go to the hospital, make sure that this information is given to the chief of police or the assistant chief of police of the condition of the victim, whether the victim has expired, or making sure if that individual is critical or non-critical. Next step after that is obtaining that information and collecting evidence. The witnesses will be then taken to the Helena-West Police Department. They will be interviewed. They will give a written statement and a video statement for prosecution. Once that information has been obtained, and say we find out who was the perpetrator or the suspect in this matter, that information would be given to the witness, a photo lineup or any information that they have given us. We run it through what I just got through talking about. We run that through our national or state level database to identify who the perpetrator was. And then at that time, based off of information from either the victim or witnesses, we obtain what they call a search warrant or a warrant. We get a warrant for that person. An affidavit of the matter, of the incident, of the circumstances is written by the investigator. It will be looked over by the chief of police or assistant chief of police. It will be signed by a judge or a magistrate, and that information will be given back to the CID officer, and then that individual will be placed in a position where the police department goes out and apprehends this person. If the person is found or they leave the state of Arkansas, the next thing is the chief of police would notify an outside agency, such as the state police or the U.S. Marshals, to give them information where they can go out and find this person, locate them, and bring them back into the custody of the Helena-West Police Department. Now things have changed. With a homicide or any serious violent crime, we have been just notified actually about a month ago that the prosecutor, Mr. Todd Murray, would like for the Arkansas State Police to eventually come in. The Arkansas State Police, once they come in, they will become the primary of the case. We will be the secondary of the case. So in so many words, we're assisting the state police with the investigation and keeping up with the investigation for prosecution. Once an individual is brought in for questioning, he or she is Mirandized. A brief interview would be with this individual, and it would be a written and a video interview with this person. All of this is collected. That person who has been arrested or detained will then be transported to the Justice Center, which we have actually 72 hours, depending on what the case is, to take that person in front of a judge to get them their first initial hearing. At that time, during the time of the investigation, the victim's family member or next of kin, if it's a homicide, will be notified for death notification. That information will be given to the coroner, who he will submit that to the crime lab or the medical examiner of the particulars of what happened on this case. So they would have some type of general information of what they're looking for doing an autopsy. If that's not the case, we just have someone that's probably seriously injured and they're going to live. What that information is once that person gets to the point where they can talk or give some type of information, additional information to the police department, that information is added into what the detectives have as a supplement. That information will go into the case file, and the case coordinator will make sure that that file is in compliance for prosecution and or anything such as discovery or anything like that. Once that person is brought back, the chief of police, his job or the assistant chief is to make sure that notification has been made to the mayor of what the particulars are, what parts of the investigation that we may be looking for or we may need in this investigation, and also keeping that individual updated so that information can go out to the public if needed. And a lot of things can't go back out to the public due to the fact of this sensitivity of the department. And because of the investigation, we just can't put everything out there, but the pertinent information on what happened, when it happened, who was involved, and what that individual was charged. Because due to prosecution and the sensitivity of the whole investigation, a lot of information can't get out there. But those are the steps in which, if you have a shooting, who comes in, who investigates the shooting, what's the process for bringing this person in, obtaining information and warrants, and then doing follow-ups back with the victim, also making sure that the individual who you arrested is actually going through the process through the courts and making sure that everybody is in compliance when dealing with this individual who has rights like anybody else, and making sure that we keep in proper documentation of everything. But if that answers your question, that pretty much happens.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That precisely answers my question. So for everybody, that's both a structural overview of the police department and a practical overview of what happens when a reported crime is made. And so I'll open up, if anybody has any follow-up questions, go ahead and jump in now. And everybody's muted out right now, but does anybody have any follow-up questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Chief, how are you? You just said that the state police have now been told, I guess, you all were told that the state police has to come in now when it's a homicide. Do y'all have to call them the night that it happens, or is this something that you call them like later on the next day or something? Because if it's like in the middle of the night, do you still have to call the state police out?
Yes, ma'am. To answer that question, Let's go back to our crime rate and far as our homicides. This year, well, last year we had approximately 13 homicides. And with those homicides, the year before we had about 12, the year before we had about 11. And I'm proud to say with the men and women of the Helena-West Police Department, we have between an 83 to 85% solve rate just within our police department. But the prosecutor looked at it as, because of the manpower and because of the lack of resources, like a department like Helena-West, the sheriff department, Marvel, that we didn't have the manpower or the resources to get out there to get them what they needed and to get those resources to us. They felt that the state police would be needed to come in to help with the cases and to get solid prosecution. So let's say we, like Mr. Etherly said, person gets shot or they may expire later on. Immediately, it's my job to contact the state police. What I would do is call the CID commander for the state police, and they normally work out of Little Rock. And what at that time, what we do is maintain, just like I told you the procedure, get the witnesses, make sure we get documentation, who did this, making sure we get notification of the next of kin. They actually come in with this fancy equipment to do graphics, like a computerized graphic of the crime scene. And they come in to help out with the assisting us with making sure that these people are interviewed, and if they go across state lines or go somewhere else, they have the resources to reach out to these different agencies or federal agencies to help us out in apprehending this person. So as soon as a crime like that, and it's a whole memorandum that Mr. Murray had put out, homicides, trafficking, sex trafficking, gang activities, anything like that, that is going to be sensitive in nature. He would like to have the state police come out immediately. And that's what I have, even with an officer involved shooting. And just let you know that it would be biased for us to investigate our officer who shot someone. We can't do that. For the integrity of the case, they would be called in to investigate our officers, even from public corruption or anything where the officer may have to be arrested. We don't go and arrest our own officers. We bring the state police in, and those are the outside entity and the impartiality of the whole thing. They will be the ones who spearhead the case. And as soon as something like that happens, it is the responsibility of the chief of police or the assistant chief to go ahead and make notification to the state police. If that answers your question.
It did. Thank you. Oh, and that brought about another question.
Yes,
I know
ma'am.
you said it was 13 homicides in 2020.
Yes, ma'am.
What did you say the solving rate was? You said you were
Our
practicing.
our solving rate for 2020, all the way back to 2018, our solve rate just with the Helena-West Police Department is between 83 to 85%.
Okay.
That's on the media homicides that we've had. We have solved pretty much all of our homicides. Now, there are some that have not been solved, and that's due to the fact that if the state police come down and we think the case is outside our jurisdiction, normally what I would do is tell them, okay, hey, they will come in, they'll ask, hey, Chief Smith, are we the primary on this case or we secondary? And if I say primary, that means that they take over the case and we assist them. But the ones in 2020 that we've had, I know it was 3 that we've had so far that was turned over to the state police that they're still working on. All the other ones that we've pretty much worked on, it's like 3 or 4, I take it back, 3 or 4 that they have became primary on. They still working on those. But other than that, we pretty much got an 83 to 85% solve rate with our department.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief Smith, do we have officers with the state police that are assigned to this area, or how exactly does that work? Do we get a different officer every time there's a call?
No, sir. Troop D, they work out of Little Rock. Right now, they're very short. They having problems, which I talked with Colonel Brian, who is the director of the Arkansas State Police. The problem is they have, just like any other police department, hiring people, individuals able to pass the drug test, pass the background, or either go through physical training. Right now, they had a total of 8 people at one point. I know from I got here in 2017 to 2019, they had 8. Right now, they're down to 5 people. Now, when I say this, they don't just cover Phillips County. They cover Crittenden County all the way up from Crittenden County all the way down to, I guess, at Lake Village. They are assigned there. Not, mainly, they'll come in as a group, they'll work, but they're spread out short. But we have been working with the same individuals from their CID unit since I've been here. There's no changes other than an individual has been promoted or something like that. And that's pretty much it. But they've lost a lot of people due to promotions, and they've been going through probably about 3 or 4 classes since I've been here. And they have only hired so many that they actually put in highway patrol because they're very short there, and it's very hard to get into CID within the state police. But we work with the same individuals, nobody different.
Okay. Well, with them being shorthanded, does that affect the time it takes them to get here when you guys do call them, or do they typically respond pretty quickly?
No, it take about 2 hours. You're looking at a 2-hour period, but then, like, Mr. Anthony is an attorney. That the main thing is that the preservation of the evidence that you have there. You can't just let it sit out there if it's raining or something like that. You got to work pretty quickly. So as soon as you get that information as the chief of police, that you got a one down and at the Walmart parking lot, spending plenty of spent casings out there. We got several witnesses. You got to automatically go ahead and do what you can do, relay that information to them. So they're coming 2 hours because most of your agents, you probably got 1 or 2 that lives in the Marion-West Memphis area. We used to have one in Mariana, but he retired. He no longer works for the state police. He retired after his 25 years of service. So you're looking at individuals coming from Little Rock. Now, when they come from Little Rock, they have to bring a certain type of piece of equipment. They have to all band up and get the formulate a plan. And when they come in, they meet with myself or the assistant chief to get the particulars of everything, who's doing what officer is doing that. So you're looking at about 2 hours to get there, probably a 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, a quick briefing of what happened before they get to working. But when they work, you might be there, the crime happened at 2 p.m. And by the time they get there and everybody gets together and formulate a plan, you're looking at probably 4:30. And by the time they finish, it might be midnight.
Oh, wow.
And all that information, once you get all that information, we come back to the whole and we get together and debrief on what happened, what transpired. And then that's not including, you might bring witnesses, which we try to immediately get their information and get them on out of there. And that's not included if you develop a suspect, you bring that suspect in, you're trying to do your homework, figure out this. And then if that person might call somebody and say, hey, I want my lawyer, you have to wait till the attorney gets there. And then that just really stops everything, because if they ask for their counsel and they don't want to talk, then that's something else. But the main thing is preservation of the crime scene. What do we have? Witness statements, and also the evidence that we have in front of us, so we can be able to put all that together so we can start our investigation and get that information for prosecution.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
Any other questions? All right. There's follow-up questions, and Chief, what I'm trying to do is build from the ground up, and so and we want to thank you for for participating and talking and explaining these things to everybody. And
Yes, sir. Thank you.
we're trying to want them to have a base level understanding of what a department and then what our department does, and then because going forward, next time we meet, we'll probably go to court. And that is, I'll get somebody to kind of explain the court process, not me.
Yes, sir.
Mine would be one-sided, but just the same, so everybody has an understanding of what the process is from the time it happens or before it happens to when it happens and how it gets disposed of. So certainly we appreciate you. And thank you
Yes, sir.
We'll probably call you back at some point in the future, because once they get an understanding of how it works from end to end, then there'll certainly be other questions that crop up about what happens in the middle and what about this and what about that.
Yes, sir. And I thank everybody too.
Yes, sir. Anybody got any other questions or issues? And if you don't, what I want to do is we just did 2 weeks in a row, so if it's okay, let's take next week off, and then we'll meet again. That'll be the 17th. Is that gonna be okay for everybody?
Yes, that works for me.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, so we'll meet again on the 17th, and like I said, what we'll do is we'll go to court next time. So at this point, and what I want to do is just create a base level understanding of how it works from the ground up, and so you get an overview of how the police department works, what they do when a crime is committed, and then the next time I have somebody to come and explain what happens in court. And in the interim, I'm going to email y'all some documents from some cases that are actually active cases on the Phillips County docket, so that you can see kind of what happens to cases once they get to the courthouse and get in the system. And just so that you understand. And I think as we go along, it'll help you to build some questions that you might have about things that actually happen, some actual incidents or whatever. And perhaps we can start to fill in the blanks. Like I said, we'll have Chief come back and you can talk to us about the department, because you may at that point start having questions about, okay, what would help the police department do this better? What would help them do that better or whatever, once you kind of get a ground up, to conclusion understanding of the entire process. So that being said, does anybody have anything you need to address with me?
Mr. Atherley,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Atherley, Chief Smith, I would like to give everyone our strategic plan that we did for 2018 to 2021. And
Okay.
if anybody get a copy of that, and also we'll try to get out a flash drive with the new policy that you and the rest of the members of the council approve. If they have any questions about use of force, racial profiling, and then there was another thing that was implemented by then President Donald Trump on duty to intervene based off of the Michael Floyd case. I'll be willing to come in and talk about that too, but I'll make sure everybody gets those documents. And if they have any questions, they can talk to us about that.
Okay, we appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. Thank you for attending, and I'll email those documents to you in the interim. I think I sent y'all all of the police committee recommendations from 2013. I'll email the additional documents to you, and until then, good night, and y'all feel free to contact me if you have any questions. See y'all later.
Good night.
All right, thank you.
Good night.